everyone, and welcome to SQL Bits 2020, the greatest data show on earth. I am Ree Irish, a senior program manager with Microsoft. The session that I'm doing today is 10 DBA tasks for Azure SQL. What's different than on-prem? I am a senior program manager with Microsoft. I manage the product group relationship with the MVP program and their relationship with the SQL community. I am active with PASS, and I help run the SQL Server user group in Atlanta, Georgia, and help run their SQL Saturday. Today, 10 DBA tasks for Azure SQL. What's different than on-prem? We are going to cover our PaaS and IaaS offerings. We will talk about automatic updates, managing permissions, creating a server in the Azure Portal, deploying a database in the Azure Portal, configuring firewalls. We'll touch on private endpoints. I want you to leave the session understanding backups. We are going to demo restoring a database and explain some different options that you have. We will talk about job scheduling and agent tasks. And then finally, we will wrap up with cost and budget management. But what I want you to walk away from this session knowing is a few things that are not on that list. And first, that the skill set you currently have converts to the Azure SQL world. As the boss for a team of DBAs in my life before I joined Microsoft, I wondered if converting to Azure SQL would cause us issues down the line. Now, sure, we could work out all the kinks of the migration, and that would go okay. But what happens in 2 months when there's an issue in production? I had faith that my team could tackle just about whatever was thrown at them in an on-prem world. But would they have the skills to handle an issue at 2 a.m. on an entirely different platform? The toolset, the engine, the function, etc., they're all the same. So the answer to that question is yes. The skill set you have will serve you very well in an Azure SQL world. So it's important to not be intimidated by that and to know that you're already ahead of the game. So in this upcoming session, when I say SQL, I specifically mean T-SQL, SQL Server, Azure SQL, essentially the Microsoft SQL. We think SQL is the best in the entire world because it's familiar, consistent, and flexible. Everything that you're going to see here today is all powered by the same engine. Just certain things may be flipped on or off. But from the edge to the cloud, it is the same engine. Now, T-SQL is the language that they all leverage and the language that you all, especially here, know very well. Also, the same tools that you use for SQL Server apply to Azure SQL. And what this brings to the table is rapid development cycles and lowering cost at the same time. Using SQL allows you to leverage the tools and technologies that you and your team are already familiar with. And leveraging these easy to use tools allows you to be more agile and free yourself from some trivial issues. When we talk about automatic updates in our first section, I think a lot of you will be very pleased that you're not going to be having to manually do these at 4 o'clock in the morning when your company is having downtime. So while there are a lot of choices that we're going to discuss, please keep in mind that the platform is flexible and will help you meet what your exact needs are. So Azure SQL. Azure SQL is actually an umbrella term that has a lot of things under it. First up is SQL Server on virtual machines. And these are best for migrations where the application you're running needs OS level access. And I suspect most of you in attendance today are already running SQL Server on virtual machines. There is expansive SQL and OS version support for VMs. Our next options, managed instances. Now this is best for lift and shift migrations to the cloud. This is from where things are, everything that you need is kind of contained. Managed instances will work for you. And then finally, what we're going to spend most of our time talking about today are Azure SQL Databases. And these are best for modern cloud applications. There are options like Elastic Pool and Hyperscale. But we're pretty much going to stick with a single database, deploy, management, restore, backup, those kind of things. This is an intro kind of session if you're an on-prem DBA and looking to find out what you can do in Azure SQL. So like I mentioned, Azure SQL on Azure VMs is an infrastructure as a service, or IaaS offering. Azure SQL Database and managed instances are both known as Platform as a Service, or PaaS offerings. Now, this means that you, the DBA, will manage a lot less than you typically would in either an on-premise SQL Server or even a SQL Server on Azure VMs as part of our IaaS offering. So if you run a PaaS offering, Microsoft is responsible for the following tasks: backup of your database and transaction logs, high availability within your Azure region with a financial guarantee, installation, configuration, and patching of SQL Server software, installation, configuration, and patching of Windows servers, consistency checks on your database, assuming any of you are or all of you are doing those, and performance monitoring your database is also something that Microsoft does. So you might be wondering, well, then what's left for me to do in Azure SQL? Well, configuring disaster recovery across Azure regions is a task for you. And while this is just a few clicks, you get to convince your boss to pay for it. It is not turned on by default. Performance tuning, which is getting utilization down by query optimization, actually saves your company money. So if you walk away with nothing else from this session today, keep this in mind. Optimization is now a quantifiable part of your job. Saving time means saving your company money. If you can go to your boss and show them, this is how long it took before, this is how much it cost before, here's the work that I've done, this is how fast it's running, this is how much money we saved, makes it really easy for your boss to give you rewards. It gives something to your boss that he or she can take to their boss to show your value and that you're saving the company money. And more than once, I have been able to use something like that to earn bonuses for the people on my team. So something else that you have to worry about, network architecture. Now, you may not have had to worry about this in your on-prem world. It's not something that I always had to worry about. I always was lucky enough to work with an amazing networking team who handled a lot of this. I would tell them what I wanted, what I needed, what I had to have, and usually they would come back and tell me what I was allowed to have. And then we would work those things out together. But now you have to handle a lot of that as a DBA. So people ask me all the time, is the DBA role going away? Absolutely not. But it is changing a little bit. The lines are getting blurred in between different jobs. So what else do you have to worry about? User management and security. It is your job to make sure that users are connecting that are allowed to, and that things are happening securely. You also get to help your business derive value from the data that you are storing. It is your job. Every company that possesses data, and if you work for a company that doesn't, I'm not sure why you're a DBA. Data has value. Now, I'm not suggesting you go sell it somewhere, but you can use that data to create value for your company, to learn more about how processes work. What are you storing? What are you not storing? What do you want to store? Data is information, and information is money. And then, of course, there's the database housekeeping. And this is that boring DBA stuff that a lot of DBAs don't like to do, setting up jobs and making sure that they run, restores, deploys, migration, monitoring, a lot of things you still get to do or still have to do those. So let's talk about automatic updates, right? How fantastic. Never worry about upgrading an environment again. So that means no more SQL patching, no more OS patching. The same version of any query the same version query run against any SQL DB will return the same value. They will always be in sync. We will take ownership of that. It is important that you align your apps with the compatibility level of your database, because Microsoft has committed that we will not change the SQL engine under a specific compatibility level. So if your app works with this version, your app will always work with this version. You will notice at the bottom of this slide, I have a link to a Microsoft doc. There are links to every single thing that we talk about today. The last page is not a Microsoft doc. It was a link to a blog post written by Joey D'Antoni, who did a fantastic job of helping me identify some of the things that DBAs still have to do. So the link is his, and he gets credit for that. We're going to talk in a minute about how updates happen. And the question I get asked most often here is, can I choose when updates happen? You cannot. We are working on some different notifications, but you can add a column to your VM details that gives you notifications and alerts in the portal, and it communicates a schedule for planned maintenance. It will send an email to the subscription owner and the co-owners group. You can add additional recipients or channels to that communication by creating Azure Activity Log Alerts. You'll want to set event type as planned maintenance, and then set exactly the things that you're worried about happening to make sure that it sends an email to anybody who would have concerns about those kind of things or need a heads up. So what is a planned maintenance event? So for each database, Azure SQL DB maintains a quorum of database replicas where there is one replica as the primary, and at all times that primary replica must be running and online servicing with at least one secondary replica healthy. Now during a planned maintenance event, members of the database quorum will go offline one at a time. And again, it will maintain that there is one responding primary replica and one healthy secondary. And then eventually your Azure SQL database will fail over from primary to secondary. It'll confirm that it's healthy, and then the planned maintenance event will happen on that primary replica. Now, so what do you need to be worried about? Well, when it fails over, they typically complete within 30 seconds. The average is actually 8 seconds. So relief, right? If your application is already connected to the primary when things fail over, your app is going to have to reconnect. It is very, very important that your development staff build in healthy retry logic. It's the case anyway, but it's certainly the case with Azure SQL. If you were running a long-running query when this happened, it will have to reconnect. But the good news is that there is a very specific error that pops up if the query attempted to hit a database while it was in failover, and it is error 4613, database unavailable. It is not currently available. Please retry your connection. So your application should know that you need to retry. Oops, let's go back a slide. Sorry. Okay, so how often do they happen? Well, on average, about 1.7 events per month. But again, average 8 seconds. To find out more about these kind of events that are happening on your system, you will go to Resource Health, and the Health History section contains the downtime reason for each and every event when it is available. Let's just pick one really quickly and go to Resource Health here. And so I am connected to an Azure SQL database here. Scroll to the very bottom in the menu, and Resource Health takes you to Events. This is just a demo database. I don't really have a lot going on, so there's not really much to report in Health. So let's talk about permissions. So Azure SQL is different than on-prem. You're going to want to make sure your admin is a group. And so this will help you avoid a single point of failure should the need arise. Remember to create users at the scope of individual databases. And I understand that this can cause a problem with developers. If they're using SSMS or Azure Data Studio, that will send them to master and they will have to redirect. But again, there's a resource here at the bottom of the slide that gives you more information about managing logins. So there are there are two administrative accounts, the server admin and the Active Directory admin, and they both act as administrators for your server. To identify these administrator accounts for your SQL Server, you're going to go into the Azure Portal and navigate to the Properties tab of your SQL Server or SQL database, and it looks exactly like you see here. And we'll get into this shortly, so you'll see it as we go. When you create an Azure SQL Server, you must designate a server admin. SQL Server creates that account as a login in the master database. This account connects using SQL Server authentication, meaning you need to have a username and a password set, and only one of these accounts can exist. There is one Azure Active Directory account. It can either be an individual or a security group account, so that either of those can be configured as administrator. This can be done using PowerShell, but not via the portal. The second link there on the bottom of your screen actually talks about how to set up guest accounts that are outside of your Azure Active Directory typically. I only learned how to do that this past week, so I wanted to share that resource with you. So the server admin and Azure Active Directory accounts have the following characteristics. They are the only accounts that can automatically connect to any SQL server on the database. These accounts enter user databases as the DBO user, and they have all of the permissions in that user database. Now, the owner of any particular database also enters the database's DBO user, but we're specifically talking about these two right now. They do not enter the master database, though, as DBO user, and they do have limited permissions in the master. They are not members of the standard SQL Server sysadmin fixed server role, and that is not available in SQL database. They can create, alter, or drop databases. They can create logins, users in the master, set or modify server level IP firewall rules. They can add and remove members to the DB manager and login manager roles. They can view sys.sql login system table. They cannot be renamed. To change the Azure Active Directory admin account, you're going to use the portal or Azure CLI. Once you set the server admin account, it cannot be changed. So next up, creating a SQL server. And this is actually really simple, surprisingly simple. You're going to, in the Azure portal, you will simply navigate to SQL servers in your menu, and you're going to click Add. So let's take a look at that really quickly. This is the Azure portal. I am home right now. You can change things on the dashboard. I actually never use my dashboard. What I tend to use is everything in this column here to the left. And I have a few favorites set because those are the things that I use the most frequently. So my SQL servers, this is what I have access to. We're actually going to click Add. Okay. So this is my subscription. I have a resource group that already exists. So we're going to navigate to that one. I happen to know that that resource group is in the central US. That becomes important as we build anything on top of it. You're going to want them to be in the same region. So we have to give the server a name, and we are going to call this bits demo user. And I want this to go in, oh, sorry, the central US. I need to set a server admin login, which we talked about a minute ago. Okay, and then I have to give it a password. That red always panics me until I realize it's just saying the password I haven't typed in yet doesn't match, because of course it doesn't. Okay, so create database server, review and create. This lets me just kind of go back over everything that I just put in here. Is this the correct subscription? Is this the right resource group? Is that the name of the user or the server name that I want? It is not. There we go. That would have broken us in a little bit. Demo admin user is what I have chosen to name the server admin account. And remember, I can't change the name of this from this point on. And we are going to hit create. And it is working. Okay. So we will come back to that in just a moment. Now we want to talk about deploying a database in 60 seconds. I will tell you from this point until when I have it created will not be 60 seconds, but actually clicking through and setting everything does. So creating a single database is the quickest and simplest deployment option that you have for it under the Azure SQL umbrella. A single database can either be created in the provisioned or the serverless compute tier. A single database in the provisioned compute tier is pre-allocated with a fixed amount of compute resources, including CPU and memory, using one of two purchasing models. A single database in the serverless compute tier has a range of compute resources, including CPU and memory, that are auto-scaled and are only available in the vCore purchasing model. So let's go create a SQL server. So my server deployment is complete. So I am now on my server. I'm going to want to create a SQL database or an Azure SQL database on the server that I just created. So you navigate to the Azure SQL tab. Now, if you don't already have them saved as favorites, you can actually go up here to search, and it gets you to the same place. So I am going to add an Azure SQL database. And again, remember we mentioned that this is just a single database is what we're looking at today. So I'm going to hit create. Now remember my resource group. And I need to enter the database name. So we are going to name this database bits demo. And what server do I want to put this on? I'm going to put this on the bits demo server that's in the central US. So from this point, I can hit review and create and we're good to go, right? But I want to show you this, the configure, and just like when we set up our server, this allows us to change some of the configurations or double check some of the configurations on our database before I hit go. So we are in the provisioned tier. Compute resources are pre-allocated. And they are billed per hour based on the vCores that I choose. But I can change the vCores that I want to use. We're actually going to stick with 2. We are going to, not that I made any changes, but apply. Let's review and create. And everything here is what I want. That is my subscription, my resource group. Is it in the correct region? Do I have it on the right server? Oops, I forgot to change that. We'll get to that in a minute too. Here, this additional settings, use existing data. I have the option to use sample data for this. So I could have set up a database that uses AdventureWorks. I have to do that for this. So it's just going to be an empty database, but I hit create and it is going. So it is working. And we can refresh periodically to see how that's going. So we'll come back to that in a little bit to see. So we have started the create on our SQL database, and that is working now. So let's talk about configuring firewall or private endpoints. So when the server level firewall is properly configured, the SQL Server admin and the Azure Active Directory admin can connect using client tools such as SQL Server Management Studio. When the server level firewall is configured for an individual IP address or a range, the SQL Server admin and the Azure Active Directory admin can connect to the master database and all user databases. That initial server level firewall rule can be configured through the Azure Portal. It can be configured using PowerShell, or you can use the REST API to do that. But once that initial connection is made, additional server level IP firewall rules can be configured using Transact SQL. So let's quickly just go look at, look, so it's complete. Yay. We want to go to my resource. We're going to go to this database. And I always get this wrong, but it's right across the top. So this is my database. It's created. It took a couple of minutes to deploy probably. So to set the firewall rule, I actually just click set firewall rule. I mentioned earlier that I should have changed this. I'm actually going to want Azure services and resources to be able to access my server. So I set that to yes. But to add a client IP, I hit the add client IP button. And again, this is going to use port 1433. So if your corporate network doesn't open 1433, this isn't going to work for you. They're going to have to do that. Because all outbound traffic uses 1433. So I hit add client IP, that populated some stuff here. I can change this if I want to. I could change this to my local IP. I would put that there so that I could connect to the database from my local IP, but we're just going to hit save, and it is updating the firewall rules now, and that's done. So I now have my first set of IPs that I can connect to my database. So let's talk about restores before we get to backups. The Azure SQL Database Service protects all databases with automatic backup systems, okay? And these backups are retained for 7 days for basic, 35 days for standard, and 35 days for premium. These database backups are taken automatically. There is no need for you to opt in, and there are no additional charges that are associated with backups. You will only incur additional cost if you restore one of those backups to your server. And that new database is actually charged at the exact same normal database rate as you're paying for the one that existed before or the one that exists now. Long-term retention configurations should be set if you need longer than what point in time restore can give you. So these 7 days or up to 7 days and up to 35 days. This long-term retention should be set and they can be kept and restored for up to 10 years. Now, this is something that is needed in some industries for audit and compliance reasons. I have had to restore a backup of a database before that was several years old, not in Azure, but it was a legal thing. I had to be able to restore a backup that we had restoring off to tape to show them how it existed at that point, and that I even had to be able to prove that the database that I restored hadn't been modified at all. So it does happen depending on the interest depending on the industry that you're in. So restoring an Azure SQL database, a point-in-time restore is a self-service capability. Point-in-time restores always create a new database. The new database backups are taken automatically, and so there's nothing that you need to do. So even when you restore it, it's automatically back into the restore pool again. And as I mentioned, there's no additional charges. A point-in-time restore, to recover a single or a pooled database to a point in time, you just use the Azure Portal. You go to the database overview page, select restore, choose the backup source that you want, and select the point in time. For a deleted database restore, you go to your SQL Server and select a deleted database that you want to restore. Now, a geo restore is actually the cheapest disaster recovery solution that exists. You can restore a backup to any Azure region that you want, even when the source Azure region is inaccessible. Now, there will be a higher RTO restoring across regions, but if this is for disaster recovery, the RTO is actually worth making sure being up, because sometimes being down will cost you even more money. So let's go through a couple of restores. So first, let me show you a deleted database restore. So I'm going to want to go to my SQL servers, and I happen to have so this is a server that has existed for a while. I tend to play with things on it, and I tend to break things on it. Let me find. Maybe I'm not. Oh, it's right there. Sorry. Deleted databases. So I went to my SQL server. This one happens to be my demo server. I clicked deleted databases, and here are two that I deleted. Originally, I created this one on 8/24. I created this one on the 5th. And then I deleted them on 9/4. So I can restore this database. It will have to be a new name. I cannot restore it as that one. So let's okay, and it is going to come up on the same server that it was on before. It's going to restore to the point in time that I deleted it if I choose, and we're just not going to mess with that right now. So it's going to say review. We're going to go through. I did rename it so it exists, and we're going to hit create. So it's actually working right now on restoring my database. But let's just restore and rename a regular database that we have taken care of. Oh, I need to go to my databases. I'm sorry. So SQL databases. There we go. Here we go. Let's pick this database. And we are going to restore this bits demo database that we have. And when do we want to restore it? Well, we sort of just created this one, but I chose to rename it. I could go probably, maybe that'll work. Nope. I picked the wrong time, so let's do this. No. Okay. When it was created or when it backed up. Confirm everything here. Is it the right resource group? What database am I using? What database is this a backup of? Is bits demo? It is a point in time restore. My restore point is set. Do I have the region correct? Yes, everything's good to go. And I'm going to hit deploy. And so it's working right now to restore databases. So if you, I don't know if you noticed this little thing lit up right here. This will change and will let me know once those are finished. I'll get another alert. So those were walking through two kinds of restore. One, restoring a database that I deleted by accident, and then one restoring just from a backup that I wanted to use. So recovery time. So while this runs, let's talk about recovery time. The answer is how long? It depends. What does it depend on? It depends on the size of the database. It depends on the compute size of the database, number of transaction logs involved, the amount of activity that needs to be replayed to recover to whatever specific restore point I chose. It's going to depend on the network bandwidth. Specifically, if you're restoring to a different region, which I mentioned with regards to disaster recovery. And then something that's outside of your control, and that is the number of concurrent restore requests that are being processed in any given target region that you chose. A lot of factors go into, just like in an on-prem world, go into how long is it going to take me to restore a database. So before we go back and check on those restores, let's talk a little bit about job scheduling and agent tasks. So in managed instances, it works exactly the same as what you're already familiar with. So feel very comfortable there. Your current skill set works. For job scheduling and agent tasks, though, you actually have to use Transact SQL to create or manage Elastic database jobs. The link that is at the bottom of the screen is the one that shows you exactly what code you need to use to create a job. You'll just have to change the parameters, you'll have to change some code or whatever it is you want it to do, but the bones are there. Microsoft has already done the work for you. So to make this happen, what do you have to do? You have to create a credential for job execution, right? So this credential is used to connect your target databases to your target databases for script execution. The credential needs appropriate permissions, just like it does in an on-prem world, in all of the databases that are specified in the target group. Oh, well, what is a target group? So when I create a job, I get to be flexible in what I want this job to run on. I can have it run on all of the databases on a server. I can have it exclude an individual database, or I can have it target a specific database. But I have to set that target group when I build the job. And so the target group can be one server or one database. You can use jobs to collect data using some built-in parameters that we have. Or that you set yourself, and you can use these jobs to monitor database performance. And so what can you do with these jobs? Well, you can deploy a new schema to a lot of different databases at the same time, monitor database performance. You can go in and view the job definitions. You can ad hoc run a job whenever you want, just like right now with the agent or SSMS, you can go and you can right click and you can click start job. You have the ability to do that. You just have to do it with code. And you can schedule job execution. So I know it's not like SQL Express where you can't schedule a job because there's no agent. You can schedule job execution. And again, that link is going to be vital with showing you the code that you need to get that set up and running. So cost and budget management. Let me say this. It is very important for the owner of your Azure account to put restrictions in place with regards to cost. There is no need for a junior DBA to be able to, because they don't know what they're doing yet, cost your company $20,000 a month, $100,000 a month. So your Azure account owner is the one who sets these things. And let's go play with these really quickly. So let me find. Okay, so you may have noticed when we were building the database earlier that this number here changed as I moved things around. So I can change the number of vCores that this is going to use. And you'll see that that did in fact increase the cost. But so does the database max size. Obviously vCores has a bigger impact, but if I jack everything all the way up, that is how much this is going to be estimated to cost me a month. So the people who left the session early who didn't hear this are going to be in trouble. So I could choose to make any particular thing that I built serverless, and that auto scales to what I need. The cost is not set, obviously, but it could be what really, really works for your company, especially if your database isn't getting a lot of activity for the bulk of the month. And then in these little short windows of time, there's spikes of activity. And you should work with your account rep to determine what's best for you. I would hope that they would have some great advice for you. But we are going to not save these. And I don't know if you guys saw the little toast that popped up telling me that at least one of my deploys was ready to go, or one of my restores was ready to go. And I included bits in the name. Let's see. Oh, deployment succeeded. Let's take a look at this. Take us to our deployment is complete. Go to my resource. Oh, I broke something. Well, that's not good. I would love to tell you I know what I broke, but I don't. And this one is still in progress. Once it finishes, I will be able to see it in my databases list if I just know where to look. I don't have to put that in there. I can have it list for me only things that are within my resource group. And so these are the databases that I have access to right now. So some resources that are really, really important. There is an amazing ebook, Deploying SQL Server to 2019. There's tons of free training that Microsoft offers you on how to get better at Azure SQL, how to learn. We give you all of the tools that you need to learn this. So aka.ms/SQL workshops is a fantastic place to start. If you dig in deep enough, you'll find plenty of slide decks. This slide deck is there somewhere. Bob Ward's slide decks, Anna's, a whole bunch of people's slide decks are there. We share knowledge. You can make compare SQL and Azure at the database feature specifically at this link. We now have on Channel 9 Microsoft, and we have a YouTube channel as well for Data Exposed. And those are released twice a week. One is the product group, and they're small bites of data maybe up to 10 minutes of training. And I think everybody can spare 10 minutes once or twice a week. So one of the releases during the week is the product group. One of the releases during the week is the an MVP, and they are all talking about teaching you how to be a better DBA every day. You should always try. Bob and Anna actually recently hosted an Azure Bootcamp, and that is totally free. You can go back and view that. There's a link here. A group of MVPs wrote an ebook this last year specific to SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. That is available for free download. And Bob and Anna have also created Azure Learning. It's like 60 sessions of these little small bites of Azure Learning taught by Bob Ward and Anna Hoffman, and they are really, really good at what they do. I'm really good at teaching people what Azure SQL is and how it can work for you. So this is the end of my session. Thank you very much for spending the last 50-ish minutes with me. We're trying to answer questions in the chat as we go. However, if one of your questions was not answered today, my promise to you is that if you will send me an email at read.irish@Microsoft, I will do what I can to answer that question for you. Hit me up on LinkedIn if you want. My advice for connecting with people on LinkedIn is always send them a message to tell them where they heard of you, where you connected, where you might have met. I sometimes get invitations from people we have no connections in common, and I have no idea where I met them. So I'm far more likely to not accept one of those. And you can always, again, free training. And that is it for us today. So thank you very much. And I hope you all enjoyed this and that you have a good day.